Pokemon that's either been so dominating in just taking knockouts and putting down damage, or it's made kind of an interesting board position when you know it can get a knockout and you play around it, or in a number of cases as well, it's actually just been well countered and well matched by the opponent. So it's certainly a tough one to use. I don't think it's the easiest Pokemon in the world to execute flawlessly, but certainly interesting to see players looking at it and thinking, yes, I want to play with this. This is now a core component of my team, and it's such a new Pokemon. You know, in earlier rounds that we weren't able to feature, maybe it caught some people off guard.
Yeah, especially because it is one of the newer inclusions from the Crown Tundra. A lot of players are looking at it with that high attack stat and just the ability for it to go very, very fast in Trick Room to just be one of those powerhouses of the team. But let's go ahead and get right into the action and see which player is going to be moving forward into our global finals. Let's kick it off with the leads for both of these players, where we are going to see Dusclops and Tapu Fini, and here comes Rillaboom and Celesteela. Now, this is really interesting for the Celesteela because we haven't really gotten a chance to see one yet.
Nope, Celesteela's been out of favor for a little while. It's been unavailable, of course, for the previous part of this season, but now Celesteela may have a chance to shine. It's one of those Pokemon that can be quite cumbersome, and another one that really makes your opponent think twice when we get into Team Preview. When you're in Team Preview, you see that Celesteela, you know you've got to bring an answer. You can't just leave it on the field and let it do what it wants, setting up Leech Seeds, throwing down large amounts of damage. Certainly a Pokemon to be a little bit wary of, and its partner in this one I think is quite interesting. I think putting it next to the Rillaboom, being able to provide big offensive pressure out the Rillaboom, and then maybe something like the Celesteela that can slow the game down.
Right, well, here comes a really quick grass attack into that Tapu Fini. Super effective damage. It's just going to knock it out right away. Rillaboom is going to take a little bit of recoil damage from that, but now it's time for Celesteela to fire back, and there comes that Leech Seed, one of those signature moves that we do see from Celesteela often.
Celesteela is able to set up and hopefully will be sitting on the field for a very long time. It's already seen a knockout go in front of it, a huge wood hammer there from the Rillaboom. Not messing around, not bothering to try and play around it or call protects, just applies pressure immediately to that Tapu Fini, and enough pressure to get an easy knockout right off the bat. Glastrier does come in. At the top of this game, we were saying it needs that Trick Room. It's really important to make sure Trick Room's a factor here. It's got it set up, and now is its time to shine and show exactly what it can do.
Absolutely, and I feel like for Davide, it was actually such a great position to kind of lose the Tapu Fini so early, just because you did get that free switch in for the Glastrier to come in once Dusclops had the Trick Room set back up. So now Dusclops is going to be leaving the field in favor of that Incineroar, and that Intimidate ability will be dropping the attack of both that Rillaboom and the Celesteela on Miguel's side. But Rillaboom is also going to be making a switch out here for Urshifu, now coming out onto the field for Miguel.
Urshifu, a curious choice when Trick Room's up, but maybe realizing that the Rillaboom is going to be more important a little bit later, not able to do much in the face of something like the Glastrier and the Dusclops, so probably saving it. Also gets it away from the Intimidate drop that it just received, and the Glastrier now is definitely the focal point. You know, the Incineroar came in to keep it safe with those Intimidates, really, really helpful for it here, but there's certainly options to try and, you know, maybe fight back a little bit here and save that Rillaboom for later. You know, the Rillaboom's not getting any more super effective hits. Maybe it just wants to deal big damage to something like that Dusclops and round out the game there. But a Dynamax on both sides, both players realizing this is a board position they kind of want to stick with for a little bit.
Right, and especially when the Celesteela already has that Leech Seed popped down, I think that's also going to be something that you've got to be kind of cognizant of, maybe just going for that damage instead. So here comes that Max Hailstorm. It will be finding its mark into the Urshifu, so that's actually a really good switch coming in from Miguel to be able to save that Rillaboom for a little bit later.
Not enough damage, you need knockouts, you want to get the Chilling Neigh going, and that's really, really important. The damage going back though, after the Intimidate, not as much as you might want. Just kind of taking its time a little bit there, but getting defense boost, which I think is probably a little bit more valuable than just setting up the Hail. So it's kind of a tale of two max moves in this turn, where both of them are just able to try and get a little bit of damage down, but I think Miguel actually gets a little bit more by getting that defense booster, which really makes his switch even better.
The other thing about the defense boost, not only is that great just because you are in the face of this Glastrier, but the other part of that being a super effective attack into Glastrier is that Glastrier is not holding a weakness policy. In fact, it's holding a Life Orb, an item that a lot of players have opted to use just because it's just extra damage right off the bat. It's consistent damage output instead of relying on that weakness policy to proc to have those extra attack boosts.
Being able to get knockouts as well, you know, the quicker you can get to the knockout, the quicker you can get to your Chilling Neigh boost, and then you can go from there, and you don't need the Life Orb anymore, but you get to that point a little bit quicker without having to take a super effective attack, without having to mess around or do anything like that. So the Glastrier spending another turn of its Dynamax max guarding, playing it very cautiously, and it looks like Davide is certainly a little bit scared of this Celesteela now.
Well, maybe a little bit, but after using the parting shot there with Incineroar, it will be dropping those attacks from the Celesteela again. So that also puts Incineroar into a position where it can come back out and maybe get another Intimidate drop and keep this Glastrier very, very safe. But Urshifu will be able to fire back with a Surging Strikes into the Dusclops, which was Incineroar. So a really great switch for Davide there.
It's a good switch, and getting damage down is important for Miguel here as well. He wants to make sure that Dusclops is, you know, a potential to get knocked out. The parting shot is huge. It does mean that for the last turn of the Dynamax, the Celesteela is very much not scary at all, and the Glastrier will comfortably be able to take those attacks. But importantly, if he can at least land the attack this time, if there's no max guard, then he's just going to be able to get another defense boost, and that, I think, starts to cause a few more problems. The Urshifu is kind of in a unique position. It's not really threatening anything, but you can't just leave it on the field to Surging Strikes every single turn. That's going to cause some problems for sure. So a tough decision. You want to go after the Celesteela because it is going to be setting up defense boost, but you're not going to get the knockouts. And you can't really go after the Urshifu because it's just not threatening enough to warrant that. But Urshifu's leaving the field.
Urshifu is leaving the field in favor of this Indeedee, which will be resetting the terrain that was once set by that Tapu Fini from Davide. And we are going to go ahead and, yeah, see some attacks come through, but that's not really going to affect that Indeedee now, is it? So we will see this max attack from Glastrier now go into the Indeedee slot, just raising the attack of Glastrier now because that Chilling Neigh has not been able to activate yet, going for the max Knuckle instead.
Yeah, kind of balancing out the defense boost that the earlier max Steel Spike gave as well. So kind of back to what you'd expect with no modifications to the damage there. Another Steel Spike lands though, and yes, the attack has gone down significantly on this Celesteela, but it's getting defense boosts. And with the defense boost, the only two real offensive options here are Glastrier and Incineroar. Probably feeling pretty good about that. It's only 2, not 3. Could have been 3 if the targeting had been different. But still a good little position to get set up in for the end of the game.
Yeah, Celesteela has always been one of those Pokemon that's been really, really good for the end game, able to set up those Leech Seeds, and now with the ability to Dynamax be able to set up those defense boosts, this Celesteela is going to be very, very difficult to knock out on Miguel's side of the field. Already, Glastrier for Davide's side is so low, but we're still in this position where Dusclops is going to be able to, you know, do some things here, maybe have to target a little bit differently, but going after the Celesteela feels kind of risky as well.
The Celesteela is going to be a nightmare to take down, and it's the best target in this turn, but we'll have to see exactly where they decide to go. Ooh, I quite like that a lot.
Yes, that Pain Split going to be able to bring that Celesteela down a little bit more than what that Nightshade would have been able to. And we're going to see this Icicle Crash come out from this Glastrier, which actually does a decent amount of damage despite all of those boosts that we saw from that defense.
Yeah, the boosts are really, really important there, and the Celesteela unable to move in this turn as well, so it is potentially going to get knocked out very easily in the next turn with another Icicle Crash. That said, the Trick Room has ended, so there's maybe a turn where Glastrier has to play safe. The Dusclops at least has to try and set up another Trick Room to make sure the Glastrier moves before the Celesteela, and that's something that Miguel could take advantage of. It's really on him to make sure that his targeting is exactly where he needs it to be for the next couple turns.
Right, the targeting needs to be on point, just especially because Celesteela is going to be such a problem, but also Davide really trying to preserve his own Pokemon, where that Glastrier is going to be going back into its Pokeball in favor of this Incineroar, getting an Intimidate drop again, so the Celesteela is not going to be outputting too much damage here, despite the bulk.
Yeah, but the Glastrier can't do anything unless Trick Room's set up. It's just not really an option there. So really kind of going after this Dusclops is the best course of action. The Expanding Force obviously only hitting one, not the best. It looks like Celesteela's setting up for the endgame now, saying, you know what, you're probably going to get Trick Room up anyway. There it is. So I'm going to make sure I get my Leech Seeds down. And now making sure the leech seeds stick, or at least trying to break them a little bit, is probably quite important for Davide, because you can't have a Celesteela sat on the field with a double leech seed recovery every single turn. It's a nightmare, and you said it was a good late game Pokemon earlier. I'd say when you set it up right, it's a great or fantastic late game Pokemon.
For sure. Celesteela right now is already in such a dominant position here, especially with its leftovers. It's going to be healing up even more health if it's able to get up the double leech seed, if that's what Miguel decides to go for. And I feel like that's kind of where Miguel can start really putting on the pressure and say, hey, I can also cycle through. Use the Celesteela, opt for some protects, and just cycle through whether I put down a leech seed, do some damage, or protect this Pokemon.
Well, there's on that note, Miguel has more Pokemon to cycle through. He hasn't lost a Pokemon yet in this game, so he certainly has options to try and buy time, and as he's done before, very wisely work through those turns of Trick Room. This will be the second Trick Room that goes up, and he's got to play around it very wisely. That said, I mean, the Glass Stray has come in. If it gets caught, that could kind of be the end of a potential outcome. It's not going to be on this turn, but it just has to be wise with its targeting throughout the next couple turns.
Well, this was a great turn for Davide, being able to get in this Glastrier basically for free, as Miguel does go for a double protect onto both of his Pokemon. So that Celesteela and that Indeedee not doing much this turn, which also means that Incineroar for Davide is not doing very much either.
Yeah, I mean, he had to kind of try and slow it down, but Davide gets a lot out of that turn. He almost also manages to get rid of the Leech Seed, which was hanging around on that Dusclops. We saw him do that earlier in the game, so maybe that would have been an opportunity for Miguel to try and work in an attack, something like an Expanding Force to catch the Glastrier, or at least get more damage down on the Dusclops. Would have been nice there, but he plays it safe. He thinks, you know what, I'm not sure. Obviously, the Celesteela has to be wary of the Flare Blitz. Can't be messing around with that. So, you know, smart turn, I think, by both players, but overall, Davide is getting himself in a very good position for the rest of this game.
Well, Follow Me does come out from the Indeedee, which is going to draw away some of this attack. Will keep Celesteela safe to be able to potentially get off that Leech Seed, but Indeedee is going to go down to that Icicle Crash coming out from Davide's Glastrier. That is going to be the first knockout for Miguel's side of the field, and here's that Chilling Neigh ability that is going to be activated for Glastrier, just increasing that attack.
Yeah, the Chilling Neigh means the Glastrier is now a definite problem. The Celesteela, though, taking that very, very nicely. Those two defense boosts from earlier in the game coming in absolutely essential at this time. So, you know, setting up another Leech Seed is kind of exactly what you want to do, as Celesteela can now try and do what Celesteela does and slow that game right down.
Yeah, as all the damage that Celesteela just took, you see the leftovers as well as that Leech Seed health regenerating onto that Pokemon. And now the terrain is gone, so this is kind of an opportunity for Miguel to either bring in maybe Rillaboom to be able to reset the terrain, or even Urshifu if they really feel like it, just to have some more offensive pressure next to the Celesteela.
Well, the Rillaboom with its terrain can be quite interesting. Obviously, Grassy Glide being a priority move would mean the Trick Room's a little bit harder. It's a bit of an ask to try and bring in a Rillaboom in front of an Incineroar, because you're obviously going to get Flare Blitzed and take a lot of damage, but the Rillaboom has the potential to tidy up Trick Room or not at the end of this game, and importantly, you know, making sure those little bits of residual damage from Leech Seed start to rack up and start to stick maybe a little bit better could be really important. The Urshifu obviously is going to be in a treacherous position. Doesn't have any defense boosts from stuff like Steel Spike, so it's going to be a bit of an ask for Urshifu to really try and get as much down as possible, but it does have priority of its own. We know that both the Pokemon that Miguel's closing out this game with have access to priority moves, and that means that this Trick Room isn't quite as effective. You're not guaranteed to be going first, and when your Glastrier is that low, yeah, it's going to take damage.
Well, Celesteela goes for the Protect, and we're seeing yet another protective move coming out from Miguel that is going to be Detect being used by Urshifu, which means that Davide's not going to be able to get too much done on this turn either. But you can see where these Pokemon on Davide's side of the field were trying to target and really just try to get a knockout here, especially with Glastrier having that attack boost increase.
The Glastrier really needs to make sure that whatever attacks it gets off are hitting the right target, and making sure either he's picking up another Chilling Neigh or he's using the previous Chilling Neigh boost to get knockouts it wouldn't usually get. It's taking quite a long time for the Glastrier to get there, so it is quite important to kind of get into that position.
Well, Incineroar just going to leave the field now. Dusclops now coming back out, recognizing that, you know, the Trick Room is going to be ending relatively soon. So setting up for a potential to also be able to get that Trick Room set back up. But Glastrier goes down here with that little bit of HP. And you could see from that Aqua Jet that was being used, that priority move we were talking about, is going to be the first to move on the field. And Dusclops just going to take a little bit of damage there too.
Yeah, Dusclops just getting caught on the way in. It's not much, but it's something. And Dusclops coming in right as the Trick Room ends. Pretty much an ideal situation. That said, I mean, Incineroar's going to be able to buy a turn, fake out. The Intimidates are going to be rather annoying for both the Pokemon on Miguel's side of the field, but Urshifu doesn't really mind about them, right? And Incineroar can't play safe until, you know, the Urshifu's gone. Can't protect, you can't buy time. So the Incineroar probably has to go after that Urshifu this turn. The Dusclops can't do too much back to the Celesteela, and this could be that endgame where Celesteela just sets up double Leech Seed and goes from there. It's still clinging on to 2 defense boosts from earlier in the game, and that's going to make it a real issue to knock out in amongst Leech Seed and Leftovers recovery.
Detect from Urshifu. Just kind of expecting that Davide is going to be targeting down that slot, and there it is. And now we get a chance to see Celesteela go for that Leech Seed onto Incineroar, which can no longer switch out because Davide only has 2 Pokemon left. But Dusclops is able to get that Trick Room set back up.
Yeah, I mean, Incineroar is really the only big damage potential right now. I don't really see the options for Dusclops to try and start getting knockouts in there. And Celesteela may not even need to protect this turn. I mean, it's so healthy after this round of recovery that it's getting that it can comfortably take a Flare Blitz and probably a Nightshade as well from the Dusclops. So should be in a pretty solid position. If you double target the Celesteela, then Urshifu is just going to clean up and start landing, of course, you know, the Surging Strikes and the Incineroar's not going to be able to take those. The Incineroar's certainly going to struggle. So this pairing has worked really, really well. I think every Pokemon that Miguel has bought has been important. And he's got really good value out of them. I think Davide, you know, kind of left with his, I don't want to say weaker 2 Pokemon, but they're certainly not big kind of carry potential Pokemon.
Aqua Jet now coming out from Urshifu. Incineroar not in range of getting knocked out though, but all of that damage is going to put Incineroar in range of being able to restore its health using its Figgy Berry, as we are going to see Dusclops move next now after that priority move. And Urshifu just barely in range of being knocked out by that Nightshade, so that Flare Blitz is going to be able to fire off into the Urshifu slot, and that's going to be a knockout here for Davide, evening up the score for both of these players, only to have 2 Pokemon left on either side of the field.
I think if you're Miguel, though, you're pretty okay with your Urshifu getting knocked out there, because it looked like Davide kind of read into that situation and said, well, I've seen you play around this before. I've got a feeling the Celesteela's going to protect, so I'll go after the Urshifu. At least he got some damage down with the Aqua Jet, making sure that at least something landed. Yes, it activated the berry. That's annoying, but you got to get through that health pool, that potential health pool as soon as possible. So Celesteela is getting very, very, very healthy once again, all the way back up to full. It's been so low, but now it's got the perfect endgame set up. And this Rillaboom can just apply pressure with some potential priority. It's going to get some terrain, which is kind of odd. It's going to give healing back to your opponent when you're trying to sap their health slowly. But I think overall it's going to provide more than enough damage potential early on.
Yeah, I mean, Rillaboom already kind of opting to go for a little bit of that grassy glide here into the Dusclops, which is going to be enough to knock it out. We did see that timer pop up on the screen, so there is 3 minutes left in this battle, but now Miguel is at a Pokemon advantage. Flare Blitz, though, is going to even the score here as Rillaboom is going to go down, and that leaves Davide with Incineroar versus this full health Celesteela with those 2 defense boosts plus the Leech Seed. And Celesteela firing off an attack here, well, it's not super effective.
It's not super effective, but it's a critical hit. Does get a lot of damage down, and I can't quite calculate it, but Leech Seed's going to bring it dangerously low, and there it is. Yeah, that's enough. The problem with the Incineroar kind of endgame situation there was Incineroar can't keep Flare Blitzing because it's just going to keep taking recoil.
Right.
And as soon as that Dusclops went down to the, you know, the Rillaboom, that's it. That's game over. And well played out by both players, making sure their win conditions are kept at the front of mind, but not quite enough. For that may not have been optimal for Miguel. Miguel managed to play through both of those fantastically.
Really did. And now that means we are on match point here for this winners round 7 match, where the winner of this match is going to be moving on to our global finals. So let's see whether or not Miguel can do it, or if Davide can make the comeback and get that reverse sweep. Let's jump into that game number 2 and find out exactly what these leads are going to be. We are going to see Dusclops and Tapu Fini once again coming out for Davide, and it's Rillaboom and Celesteela again. So what an interesting position to be in, where same leads as game number 1, but we've got to see some changes be made here on Davide's side, or else this could snowball out of control.
He really can't give up the Tapu Fini turn 1 again. That was a huge issue in my mind for game number 1. Being able to maybe switch into something, just take those hits a little bit better, would have been absolutely fine. And Miguel probably thinking very much the same, like, why is the Tapu Fini here? I can just target it down and try and deal with you that way. So he can't really stop the Trick Room. That's something that Miguel has to let happen. And that's something that a lot of leads do struggle with. If you don't have a taunt, if you don't have a Trick Room of your own to reverse it, you just have to let it go up. And it looks like, you know, the Tapu Fini's not going to get knocked out this turn. But I think Miguel may have made some really good adaptations to deal with that.
Yeah, we did see the double target from the Rillaboom there into the Dusclops, just kind of recognizing, hey, this Tapu Fini probably doesn't really want to be in this Rillaboom's face, so it's either going to switch or it's going to protect here. And so being able to use the U-turn on Rillaboom to be able to bring Ndidi out onto the field is really, really great, because we could see some shenanigans now that the terrain is a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty that Ndidi can do. It's not quite as useful when it's in a Trick Room, so certainly a little bit limited there. But the Celesteela, once again, is not threatened by anything on Davide's side of the field, and probably feeling pretty good about its options in what it can do here. You know, that said, the switch is quite safe for something like the Ndidi. No real drawback to doing that. And just being smart, making sure, hey, I'll just take Psychic Terrain because it's the terrain I want. Don't forget, Miguel has 2 terrains to pick from. He can choose from grassy terrain, which, you know, he needed to get the Rillaboom out to get that sorted out. But he has the option to bring that in at his leisure. So certainly a number of good options for him to kind of keep up that offensive pressure.
Absolutely, and we are going to see that Dusclops is going to be switching out for Davide now that the Trick Room is set up, and Incineroar now coming out in its place. Once again, getting those Intimidate drops, which is really beneficial on this Celesteela specifically, and just kind of starting out a similar game plan to what we saw in game number 1 for Davide, just dropping that attack stat of that Celesteela so that more of Davide's Pokemon can survive. But we are going to see this Ndidi now leave the field for Miguel, with that Rillaboom coming back out in its place and changing the terrain once again, moving it back over to grassy terrain. Celesteela, though, firing off into Tapu Fini, just doing a little bit of damage there, but now it's time for a Calm Mind from Tapu Fini. This is an adaptation from Davide for sure.
Yeah, Tapu Fini didn't get knocked out turn 1, so he's able to play around it a little bit more, and the fact that he forces the switch from the Rillaboom there, and the Rillaboom, you know, leaves the field, and Ndidi comes in, and Rillaboom comes back to get its terrain, that's a window that you can set up the Calm Mind. It's not going to help with the Rillaboom, but at least you have Incineroar next to the Tapu Fini to at least try and battle back and make a little more room for yourself if you're Davide.
Yeah, even Celesteela doesn't really feel too safe in this situation and is going to leave despite having that Leech Seed set up and being super healthy. So Urshifu will be coming out in its place. But Tapu Fini not even going for any damage here, just really wants to try to protect itself in the face of this Rillaboom. And that's going to leave Davide with an opportunity for this Incineroar to fire off a Flare Blitz right into the Rillaboom. And that's going to bring it very, very low.
Yeah, not enough for knockout, but great damage to get down there if you're Davide. I mean, that was something that was really difficult for him to come back from, was losing that Tapu Fini so early. And Miguel's having to reposition his board quite a lot in this game. He didn't do it as much in game number 1, and in game 2 here, you know, we've now seen him cycle through all 4 Pokemon already, and trying to find this big advantage, like an easy knockout to just put the Pokemon count in his favor, that he was able to capitalize off very, very strongly in game number 1. I think Celesteela coming in when things are a little different, things are a little safer, really important there for him.
Yeah, but now that the Urshifu was next to this Rillaboom, I feel like the Incineroar isn't like quite as scary, but you still have to worry now that your Rillaboom is at lower HP now, that Incineroar could fire off another attack, or even this Tapu Fini, and just knock out the Rillaboom. So you gotta be really, really careful here, especially with that Trick Room. I don't know if Grassy Glide would even be enough to be able to knock out this Tapu Fini. So this next turn is gonna be really critical for both of these players.
Yep, certainly got to make sure that you land the important attacks and go from there. I mean, this Rillaboom looks quite threatened, so maybe if you're Davide, you're trying to find a window where it's, you know, either leaving the field or coming back in. And I like the way that he's kind of been playing around it. Rillaboom, though, yeah, as you mentioned, just Grassy Gliding, doesn't care about the Trick Room, and that's a large amount of damage to get down on a Dusclops.
It is a large amount of damage onto Dusclops, but Davide, you know, gave up that Calm Mind boost onto Tapu Fini in favor of preserving Tapu Fini for later, and that allowed Incineroar to get that knockout and that final blow onto that Rillaboom, just to be able to remove it from the field, but Incineroar's taking a lot from the Surging Strikes from Miguel's Urshifu.
Yeah, the Incineroar's going to be in a weird position, though, because it does get to activate its berry, but then it still has to take another attack, right? There's still another strike to come from the Urshifu, so that's a lot of damage going down, and that's where the Incineroar is going to end up for the turn. But getting rid of the Rillaboom, huge. I think sacrificing your Tapu Fini's Calm Mind to remove the Rillaboom from play is a absolutely fine trade. You're in a pretty solid position after that. And this Urshifu doesn't have any Intimidate drops affecting it from the Incineroar, so it's probably feeling pretty good. Miguel, though, going back to what he knows best, get Celesteela in, set up Celesteela, and just try and win the game that way.
Yeah, I could see a double protect is going to be coming through from Miguel, just protecting Celesteela and detecting on the Urshifu, just in case Davide does try to go for some, you know, final gambits in this Trick Room. But Incineroar is going to be changing out for Tapu Fini once again. You know, what's really interesting, Adam, we still haven't seen Davide's fourth and final Pokemon yet.
With the amount of commitment he's made to Trick Room, you have to assume it's probably Glastrier.
Yeah.
That just seems to be a really good way for this team to play. But saving it for later, you know, we talked about the positioning of the two focal points of their teams, Glastrier and Celesteela. I think Glastrier is probably something that needs to be kept a little safer, unlike it was in Game 1 where it took a lot of damage and was able to get picked off by priority moves. So making sure that conditions are perfect, ideally when a Trick Room is set, which is something that Davide is going to have to reset in this turn.
Right, and that's a big opening for Miguel to just go after damage onto Dusclops before the Trick Room can even get set up. Dusclops is in a pretty precarious position right now, and now that the Trick Room is over, that Pain Split's not going to be coming out first, so how is Dusclops supposed to be able to recover this health and also be able to dish out some damage? So I think this is going to be a great spot for Miguel to be in, just to be able to maybe just make sure that this doesn't happen. This Trick Room just doesn't go off. Surging Strikes comes out first.
Yeah, the Urshifu is going to try and do all the work on its own. I think it might need a little help from its Celesteela, but we saw some, you know, targeting from Miguel's side. We know that he doesn't want this Dusclops to be able to play at all. Of course, Tapu Fini going to be able to fire back at this Urshifu in a really good position to deal huge damage there, and that's a trade that you probably take if you're Miguel in this instance. Celesteela, though, getting that targeting absolutely where it needs to be, and no more Trick Rooms for Davide, which was a huge factor in the way he played his team last time. He also gets a defense boost from Beast Boost.
Oh, yes. Oh, the Beast Boost. That's something that you always like to see when you are playing with one of those Ultra Beasts like Celesteela. And now Davide is in this position where do you bring in that fourth and final Pokemon, or do you try to bring in Incineroar knowing that Celesteela with that defense boost might be sticking around onto the field? But here's that fourth and final. It is going to be Glastrier, as we were predicting it would be, with that commitment to that Trick Room. As we know, we don't really need the Trick Room, though, for Glastrier to really shine.
It's in a bit of a tough position, though. We saw that it was a little bit scared of the Celesteela, even in a Trick Room last time, and there's no real answer to the Celesteela on the field right now until Incineroar comes back. Incineroar can't safely come back till Urshifu is completely removed from the field, and Urshifu outside of the Trick Room is obviously going to be able to just deal with it whenever it needs to. So certainly a tough one here, and Miguel, if he can get the defense boost up, won't even mind about the Incineroar. He's already got one. We saw how good two was, and he's going to be able to pretty much guarantee a second one pretty early on here. As, yeah, Celesteela's Dynamaxing. We know exactly what Max Steel Spike does by now. It's maybe one of the most popular max moves. And that defense boost, going on top of the one that he's already got through Beast Boost, could make it just way too hard to knock out.
Yeah, I think Davide is going to be, absolutely matching this Dynamax here just because that increased health is going to be so beneficial. We know exactly how much that Max Steel Spike can do, but there's another reason why this Glastrier should really be afraid here, and that's because the Celesteela is also packing Flamethrower. If you could see that being hovered over in the move set there for Miguel's Celesteela, but Davide playing it really safe here, going for the Dynamax, but also going for a Max Guard just to be able to keep Glastrier safe as a Moonblast fires off into Indeedee. And will drop its special attack. That's pretty good there, but here comes the Steel Spike. It's going into Tapu Fini this time around. Really great targeting there by Miguel.
Yeah, fantastic targeting, knowing that the Glastrier protects in the face of this Celesteela, a piece of kind of information for the matchup he learned in Game 1, and it's definitely going to protect when there's no Trick Room. It's not even given that chance to move first. Once again, this Celesteela is getting defense boosts, and it's not threatened by the Pokemon on the other side of the field. If it can get down to the last two, as soon as its Dynamax ends, we're probably going back to our good old friend, the Leech Seed, and just setting up to win the game that way. So Miguel playing around his Celesteela so well, and Davide, whose focal point now it's Dynamax, is certainly the Glastrier, needs to get a little bit more out of it, needs to get some knockouts, needs to try and snowball the game with the Chilling Neigh.
Chilling Neigh, or maybe a Calm Mind now coming out from this Tapu Fini just to be able to do as much damage as possible. Another Max Steel Spike though going into the Tapu Fini here, and we see how bulky Tapu Fini can be, so Tapu Fini might even take 4 hits to knock out in this case.
Yeah, but Tapu Fini, yes, it's taking the hits, but it's also just not getting... It's handing over defense boosts to this Celesteela, and also this Indeedee. Like, yes, obviously the Indeedee protected, but you'd still expect a fraction more. The Hail's going to be a bit annoying for 5 turns, but really not as impactful an effect as something like the constant defense boost from Max Steel Spike.
Yeah, I mean, look at how little damage that Max Hailstorm into Indeedee really did, right? Just because of even just a singular defense boost coming in from the Max Steel Spike. That did quite a bit to keep Indeedee very safe and be able to fire off more of those expanding forces. So this is definitely a situation where I feel like Davide is going to struggle if Glastrier and Incineroar are going to be the final 2 Pokemon left if this Tapu Fini goes down this turn.
Yeah, if the Tapu Fini goes down, I think there's way too much weight that needs to be going through Glastrier, and so much of the game plan relies on that being in Trick Room, I think. The Tapu Fini knows that there's probably a burden on its shoulders as well, and just decides, yeah, it's time to protect, because Expanding Force could just start tidying up.
Well, Expanding Force might not be able to connect with the Tapu Fini, but it will be able to connect with that Glastrier, and while Protect is going to come out from Tapu Fini, a little bit of chip damage is still going to get through Protect.
Yeah, I mean, most importantly, that's another defense boost. That's now 4 stages of increased defense for the Celesteela, and that means everything over on Davide's side is going to struggle to deal with it. I mean, this Indeedee didn't protect, but it's got boost to its own defense and takes a max move. It's not a big, bulky Pokemon that should be taking max moves that comfortably, but Celesteela has just set it up for success.
Absolutely. This Indeedee is going to be so difficult to knock out now, and oh man, when you take a look at a Dynamax Pokemon, you really are looking at it to be able to make the most and get the max value from its max moves. And I just feel like Davide struggled just because of all those defense boosts coming in from Celesteela. This has been a really great matchup for Miguel.
It's been a tough time for Glastrier's Dynamax turns in both games, right? I mean, in both of them, it's been a protect and 2 attacks. And the attacks just haven't landed in those premium targets. They've not got knockouts. They've not got crucial boosts. Like Max Hailstorm doesn't give you that absolutely huge kind of boost to your stats that something like Max Steel Spike does. I just don't see an easy way for Davide to get through this Celesteela right now, especially, knowing that the boosts are there. Tapu Fini can only cling on so much longer, and once you lose Tapu Fini, you're down to Incineroar or Glastrier, and they are physical attackers who will struggle with a Celesteela. It's already got a huge defense, and boosting that up through Max Steel Spike and Beast Boost, an absolute nightmare to be handling.
Oh, and especially in the face of this Glastrier too, you know, what can you really do in terms of your max moves against this Celesteela? Max Quake's not going to hit because of the typing of this Celesteela, so you've got to be very, very careful. Even so, the typing of just Celesteela alone makes this such a difficult matchup for this Glastrier.
Yeah, and then there's Celesteela kind of setting up exactly what it wants to in the end game. We'll see just how much damage Glastrier can do to it. That is negligible damage when it should be doing a whole lot more. I think it's not far off the amount of damage it took from its own life orb.
Yeah, and it's not too far off of the damage that is going to be negated by the leftovers plus the Leech Seed health regeneration. So we're going to see Celesteela in such a comfortable position for the rest of this game. 4 defense boosts really just kind of stick it to this Glastrier.
Yeah, and the Incineroar that's lurking in the back as well, not able to come forward and just say, oh, immediate Flare Blitz knocked out, problem solved. I just don't think that's the case at all. So certainly a tough one if you're in that side of things. But you know, it's not the worst situation. You at least still have your Tapu Fini. You know, the Celesteela's damage output isn't the highest. Special attacks going into Carmine. You know, special attacks from both Celesteela and Indeedee. You've got Carmine boost to help you out there. The Tapu Fini is looking a little bit low.
Yeah, Tapu Fini is going to be in a bit of a pinch there, and that's a really tough position to kind of have that Tapu Fini to be in. Even Davide is kind of second guessing whether or not Tapu Fini is going to be enough with that Calm Mind boost to be able to clean up this game. So let's try to get some Intimidate cycled into the mix, and let's see if we can keep this Glastrier around on the field to be able to get off enough Icicle Crashes to deal with this Celesteela. But Fini Force now going to be able to do just a bit more to Glastrier and bring it to about half health. And here comes yet another move from the Celesteela, which is going to be enough to knock out this Glastrier. Flash Cannon doing the job.
Yeah, that's the Celesteela showing off just you know, how effective it can be, and there it is. The defense is raised once again. I just don't even see a way to kind of work through that. The Tapu Fini can't be on the field long enough, especially after giving up Calm Mind boost on a couple of occasions now by switching out. It just can't get enough damage down. So certainly good work by the Indeedee and Celesteela combo. That expanding force applying consistent pressure has been really, really nice. And now just Tapu Fini and Incineroar left. Tapu Fini low, Incineroar kind of low, and already used its berry from the Urshifu attack earlier on as well. Definitely a bit of a pickle here. That said, I mean, Urshifu is still available in the back for Miguel, so that could just come in and clean up really easily with something like the Aqua Jet.
Yeah, you got to be careful though. You're kind of waiting for Indeedee to get knocked out here because that Urshifu is sitting at 1 HP, being brought down to its Focus Sash. So if you do decide to switch it in while the Hail is still active, you're just going to get that Urshifu knocked out. You know Miguel's not going to let that happen, but that is definitely something to consider where that you do have the Urshifu in the back. But that's going to be the game here. Davide does not want to play out the end, and that is going to be Miguel moving on.